I hope everybody wants to keep religion out of the science classes.
Let's say you get elected. What are the first things that you think that you can go ahead and tackle on?
If I'm elected to the State Board of Education, I probably have the most experience. Your viewers may not know this, but we're very lucky to have our own Amazon data center in Columbus.
Help me understand when you hear this galaxy is this many years light away. The Muslims, the Quran, and the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ provide a lot of details of how the universe came about. So let me get your expert on this. Like, how do you think the world started?
How do I think the world started? 14 billion years ago.
Chris Orban, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
I'm excited to have this conversation about it. So tell me a little bit about you.
I came to Columbus to do the PhD program in physics at Ohio State University. So I earned a PhD in physics in 2011, and I was lucky enough to get hired as a physics professor here. And I have a lot of family across Ohio. So my dad grew up near Cleveland. My grandfather worked in the steel mills in Cleveland for most of his life. My mother is from Worcester, Ohio. She grew up in a single-parent household. Her mother was a nurse. My parents met in the marching band at Ohio State. One thing led to another. I didn't grow up in Ohio, but I moved back for graduate school, and I've set roots down here ever since. I live in the Wineland Park neighborhood, which is close to OSU's campus, and it's a very diverse neighborhood with people from all over the world that's there. My wife and I just love, knowing all our neighbors and interacting with all our neighbors and things like that. Running for the state board is just a way for me to serve our community in any way.
So you're running for the State Board of Education in District 6. So tell me a little bit about that. Actually, give us like just a general overview of what the position is all about.
Sure. So the State Board of Education, it's kind of like, there's the State Medical Board, but so this is the education version of that, if that makes sense. So the State Medical Board is involved like when a doctor or a nurse makes some sort of terrible mistake, and people have to decide whether they should continue to practice medicine or when they start. The State Board of Education has a role in the teacher discipline, but it's also where you go to apply for a teaching license. So for whatever school in Ohio that you want to teach at, you have to go to the State Board of Education and figure out which license you're going to apply for and then meet all the requirements. And then there's people that work for the State Board of Education that will process those applications and decide if it's okay for you to teach in the schools.
How many members it's made of?
Yeah, so there's 11 elected members of the State Board of Education. So take Ohio and divide by 11.
Okay.
And so each one has to represent a pretty large area. And then there's another 8 members that are appointed by the governor.
So the governor appoints 8, and there is an existing 11 that has to be elected through the state of Ohio.
Yeah, I mean, it's on the one hand, it's a one-day meeting once a month, but on the other hand, I'm literally would be representing almost 1 million people because there's 11 million Ohioans roughly, and there's 11 elected members. It's a great honor to even just be considered for this.
Yeah,
for this job.
Is it a paid position?
I think you get $40 an hour for up to 4 hours a month. So this is not very lucrative.
So why take on that challenge? Why take on to represent that many people? It seems like it's a greater responsibility in the sense of that. I don't know, maybe that might not offset some of the benefit that comes along with it in terms of finance.
The question I get a lot from people is why do you even want to run for the State Board of Education if it has so little power? So last year, for example, it used to be for the longest time, since 1953, the State Board of Education would decide who is in charge of K-12 education in Ohio. And then last year, the legislature decided to remove that power.
Why is that?
Well, I mean, a thing that happened was that Democrats, of those 11 elected positions, Democrats were able to flip a couple of those seats.
Okay.
So the Democrats gained a majority of the 11 seats, even though there were still another 8 appointed seats that had an equal vote.
Yeah.
And so that was one reason why they took away that power. The other thing that they did last year was they took away the power to be in charge of what you might call the academic standards, or the education standards. So that to me is a big thing because I helped to update some of the science standards in Ohio. I served on this big committee with the Ohio Department of Education to update the science standards. So I'm an astronomy expert, and so I updated the astronomy standards. I updated some of the science standards, physical science. I've made contributions to the computer science standards in Ohio. And I was about ready to make contributions to the math standards in Ohio, and then they removed the power from the state board and put it under the governor's office. Why do they do the things they do in the state legislature? I have no idea. Because the thing is, the governor's office never asked them to do that. The governor's office never said, hey, I would really like to choose.
Take on this.
So I have to, if elected to the state board, when I'm elected to the state board, looking at the camera, I am going to work like a dog to put the academic standards back under the State Board of Education. And part of the reason why I'm so energized to do that is because there's these fundamentalist Christians that are in the State House that I'm not so sure if they're going to put stories from the Bible into the science standards, That's not what science is about. Like, that's not, but
Okay.
they could overnight if they wanted to, because it's in the governor's office. and
Okay,
they
let
could
me
do
ask you a
that.
question. Tell me what that responsibility covers up. So you said K through 12. Give me just a general understanding of what the responsibility that recently been, transferred to the governor's side. What will that entail? Like, what is it exactly about? Do they decide the curriculum? Do they, like what happens in the school? How the school do their policy and all that stuff?
Each school district chooses their curriculum, chooses their textbooks and things like that. But the state standards are the thing that the textbooks are supposed to be teaching towards. So the standards include, these are the math concepts we want you to teach towards. These are the science concepts. These are the social studies concepts. These are the computer science concepts. And then the school districts will find resources, and the teachers will find resources to try to align to that.
Basically, they will provide the general standards that needs to be taught through the classroom, and the teacher will determine what will that entail in terms of like meeting the requirement from the state. Okay, so now why do you want to put it back on that power back to the committee?
Well, because education standards belong under the control of the State Board of Education, as they have been for over 50 years. Governor's office is busy. They're running the state. They have an important job to do.
Do you not think they might do a good job, or?
I don't know what they're going to do.
Okay.
If you look at over the decades what can happen with science standards in particular, every 5 or 10 years, there is an effort to try to put more Bible stories into the science curriculum about how did we come to be, trying to question evolution, trying to question like the age of the universe, things like that. Another example of the science standards is that the Ohio Science Standards says that the universe began something like 14 billion years ago.
The Big Bang?
The Big Bang, yeah, the Big Bang happened 14 billion years ago. Very good.
Okay.
You've done your research. But there's people, for example, at the Creation Museum, just nearby Cincinnati, they would say that the universe began 6,000 years ago. And they would say that this 14 billion year stuff is a bunch of nonsense. There's no scientific basis for that. So the 6,000 year number comes from looking at the Bible that Christians read. And the Bible includes a lot of things. It includes these genealogies. So like there's parts of the Bible that says like that, this person, their parents were this and their parents' names were these. And if you follow all those genealogies and you assume that each person lived, 50 or 70 years, that takes you back 6,000 years of people that the Bible specifically mentioned. That's how they get to the number 6,000. It's not based on, tree rings or anything scientific.
14 billion years ago, it's based on evidence. I'm a Muslim, so I have a different, take on, but...
Well, there's a lot of Muslim scientists. I mean, I'm friends with a Muslim astronomer in the astronomy department at Ohio State, and she's fantastic, and she's very devout. There's a lot of great Muslims at Ohio State University doing a lot of great science, for sure.
The reason I point that out was because the age that you just mentioned, based on the 6,000 years, so we believe in people that existed, long ago. They used to live longer.
Yeah, well, that's in Genesis as well. So there was this thing that happened, and the lifespan got much shorter, things like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm just not quite sure what the 60 years kind of sort of guesstimate came about that too.
Even so, those genealogies that I mentioned. I mean, even when they get to the part where people were living longer, it says how long that they lived. Like Methuselah lived almost 1,000 years, right? Even if you count up those numbers, you get to about 6,000, basically.
The Muslims, the Quran and the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ provide a lot of details of how the universe came about and all that stuff.
And I believe in God, by the way. I'm a Christian. I'm a leader at the church I'm a part of, and I believe that God created the world and put a lot of thought into it. He's still up there paying attention to us and the choices that we make, and exactly how it all works, I don't understand I don't know that anybody really understands exactly, but that is something that's a part of my life for sure. And it's an important part of me for sure.
Let's go back to a little bit about putting back that power back to the committee. Has there been any questions, kind of sort of be questioned, the ability, the committee to have that power back on to say that, okay, well, hey, where are you taking the education system?
There is one effort that could reverse the decision, which is that there's a court case that's currently in the court system. They haven't made a final decision on it yet, but the members of the State Board of Education, after they lost a bunch of the power, they filed a lawsuit to say that you can't do this. A judge is going to make a decision on that at some point in the next year.
By the way, how long was it ago when they lost the power?
I believe it's about a year ago.
And still has not been made a decision. The judge hasn't made a decision, still looking through the efforts of both parties, I would assume.
Well, there was a point where our governor, Mike DeWine, just kind of had to make a decision of, are we going to go through with this? And he decided, yep, we're going to do it. From DeWine's point of view, the state legislature had signed a bill, had passed a bill by a majority, and then he signed it into law. And there was a date that bill was supposed to start, and even though there was this court case, he decided to go ahead and move forward with it because we have to run the schools. We can't just put everything on hold because there's a court case. At least that's what his argument was talking about.
Until the judge makes a decision, now the ball is on their court. They're working on it through. They take that responsibility on.
There were many changes, but for example, the bill that was signed involved the standards, but it also involved the state board no longer appointing the person in charge of education. And so DeWine just kind of had to decide, all right, well, I'm going to appoint the person who's in charge of education. Even though there's this lawsuit, this is the law, this is the bill that was passed, this is the law that I signed, and I'm going to appoint this person because that's what we just did.
Let's say you get elected. What are the first things that you think that you can go ahead and tackle on when you get elected?
Yeah, so I've worked a lot on computer science in Ohio. Even from some of the early days, in 2017 is when Ohio started to get really serious about computer science. There's things I would like to do that are supported by computer science teachers in Ohio. They're supported by the tech companies in Ohio. There's things I would like to do to facilitate the growth of computer science access in Ohio. A thing that I spent a lot of my time on is making sure that your kids and everybody else's kids has the opportunity to take a computer science class if they want to. So right now in Ohio, there's only about 1,000 high school computer science teachers, which is not enough for every student to be able to have access to take a computer science course. Currently only about 1 in 5 students in Ohio has a chance to take a computer science course. There's probably a lot more that would take a computer science course if they could. A thing that I've spent a lot of time on is trying to help math teachers, because everybody has a math teacher, right? Not everybody has a computer science teacher, but everybody has a math teacher. And trying to help math teachers to be able to deliver some of that computer science content. And so that's going to be one of the main things that I focus on the State Board of Education.
Okay. So from what grade starting?
I work so much with high school folks that I forget to put high school in front of the teacher.
So it would be like in high school and up.
Yeah.
9th grade and up.
So I don't have a lot of, I'm going to admit that I don't have a lot of experience with elementary education.
Okay.
I do have a toddler at home, and I have had elementary age kids in my house. So I have that experience, but my expertise is more towards middle and high school.
Okay. So, you would think that the way technology is moving and AI and all that stuff, so at least you would hope that to see the computer science already that in the making. But why is there a shortage?
So this is something I've seen personally where teachers, as they gain computer science skills, they begin to realize that they could make almost twice their salary if they go off into industry and work for like one of the banks or something like that, because there's a lot of computer programmers working for the banks these days. And so it's hard to attract people. There are some people that leave industry that get tired of working for software jobs and just writing code all day and not interacting with people. I write a lot of code and I get tired.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah. I'm a computational physicist, actually. So I don't go into the lab very much. I have friends that go into the lab and they run experiments, like laser experiments. So Ohio State has one of the most intense lasers in the world. But somebody has to go and do a computer simulation of what happened when this laser interacted with this thing, and what can we learn about electrons and the protons and and the way those things interact and exchange energy. So I'm a big computer programmer. My students, for example, they use the Ohio Supercomputer Center a lot. It's been a big passion of mine. So a lot of people think that I'm in the computer science department at Ohio State. I'm actually not part of the computer science department. I'm part of the physics department. But I'm friends with a lot of those folks in computer. Yeah.
If you could open a window of your what goes in Ohio State, give us like an example of one of those experiments.
Sure. So I collaborate with Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. They have an intense laser system that's there. The laser is so intense that you cannot use it to shoot down anything. The project that I'm on is not some sort of like active weapon thing. The project that I'm on, we try to figure out how can you make a miniature particle accelerator out of this laser thing. So instead of building this gigantic particle accelerator like you see at Fermilab in Chicago or in Europe at the Large Hadron Collider, how can we accelerate this particle in a much smaller experiment using laser technology? And so my friends go into the lab and they perform those experiments, and then they bring the data back, and especially when they're confused, they're like, what happened, Chris? What happened here? I don't understand why this didn't work. And so that I play a role to try to make sense of that. I have a little bit of ability to fix things in my house, like I can screw in light bulbs and that sort of thing. But computers are kind of more in my strength. I'm not very much of a handyman.
Are you a people person?
Am I a people person? I mean, I'm definitely an introvert.
Okay.
Are you an introvert?
Yeah, I am.
Okay.
To me, this is not an introvert. But when I'm like on a public stage, yes, I get quite nervous. But having a conversation on one-on-one, so like here, I feel comfortable. But if I'm on a stage, part of a panel or something, and with live audience, I get quite nervous. I become like,
Yeah, I've never run for office before.
I fight it though. I fight it. I fight it like crazy. Go ahead.
I've never run for office before,
Okay.
so I'm not one of these people that's always just like going to all the parties
Yeah.
and trying to meet people.
I mean, that's part of the job though.
It is.
Yeah.
I do enjoy it. It's
Yeah.
it's kind of, I hate to say it, but it's a little bit more fun to come here to talk to you than it is to sit in my little office working on my computer simulations,
Okay. No, because this will lead up to other opportunities and other things that you might be, not per se you, but expected of you to kind of sort of go to that route. You know what I mean? So like, how do you kind of sort of envision that?
Even before I was declared that I was running for the State Board of Education, I would just go to these teacher meetings. Like in Columbus, I'm lucky that many of these statewide teacher meetings are in Columbus, and so it's not hard for me to go to them, So teachers across the state will come, like, for example, to the Columbus Convention Center, and I'll go hang out with the math teachers from across the state. I'll go hang out with computer science teachers and physics teachers and engineering teachers. When I go to these conferences, I'm sometimes talking about the different efforts that I'm doing. So I'm presenting on, so I lead something called the STEM Coding Project, and so I have a YouTube channel, so I know what it's like to have a YouTube channel, by the way.
Okay.
And we have a lot of fun recording videos showing high school students and middle school students, here's how you can do some computer science with your science class or with your math class and that sort of thing. And part of the YouTube channel is for the teachers, because a lot of teachers don't know how to code, and that's fine. But we're there to show them here's how you can calculate the digits of pi with a computer program that's a pretty simple computer program. So when I'm going to these conferences, part of why I'm going there is because I'm curious to interact with people. Part of why I'm going there is to tell people about my YouTube channel. But I'm not there to like try to, get famous or anything like that. So here's the first moment where it occurred to me that I should run for the State Board of Education, which is that I had been to all these teacher meetings. I got to know the people, first name basis with different people. And I began to realize that in a typical year in Ohio, typical legislative year, that the presidents, the heads of these wonderful teacher organizations are rarely, if ever, invited down to the State House to testify about some new policy. Like, they're rarely, if ever, consulted about a new policy idea. I mean, this is the president of the Ohio Teachers of Mathematics. This is the president of the Science Education Council of Ohio. Like, these are large organizations, and nobody is calling them up to try to see how can we keep more of the teachers in the schools instead of leaving the profession. No one's calling them up trying to ask them, how can we improve the math scores? Because the math scores went down quite a lot after the pandemic. And the first germ of an idea that I should run for the State Board of Education was the thought that I could do a world of good if all I did was sit on the State Board of Education and make sure that somebody in downtown Columbus was handing the microphone to these organizations as often as I could.
That's a good reason.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they have a huge voice.
Yeah, we need to listen to
Yeah.
the teachers. Like,
Yeah.
there's so many things that need to be improved with the education system, and people don't listen to the teachers. It's amazing. I mean, I've met with like the chair of education committees in the State House, and I've been talking to them about education programs that the state has spent millions of dollars on that they don't even know it exists.
Who doesn't know it exists? The state itself?
The legislators don't know it
Legislature-
exists, because the way that the committees work in the legislature is that you might be on the education committee for like a few years, and then you cycle off and you're doing something else. And so their attention span for education is very short, and they don't get a chance to really dig down. And I don't know how they come up with the ideas for they want to do to change the education system, but they certainly aren't talking to teachers, that's for sure.
But the amount of time that, like let's say you get elected, but the amount of time you'll be spending on doing, the actual work of like how to improve the education, or maybe how to put together two people that were never been in the same room and have exchange ideas and stuff, because where are you going to get the time? Because you really, 4 hours a month, right? Is that what you said?
Yeah, so the State Board of Education meetings are about 1 day a month, which I don't teach every day at Ohio State, so I feel like that's not too hard to squeeze in. What I am planning to do, it's above and beyond what the State Board of Education does, is that I live very close to the State House, and I'm going to try to be as many of these education committee meetings as I can go to. I testified in the State House for the first time in 2023. Have you ever been to the State House?
Yes, I have.
Yeah.
Yes, I
have you
have.
ever had a chance to
Yeah.
testify?
No.
It's interesting. It's fun.
Somebody got elected, and I had the opportunity to kind of visit them.
Uh-huh.
And they showed me their office and stuff like that. Yeah, I did the walk around, and me and my daughter did that.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Great.
But I think that day, for some reason, there weren't that many representatives.
Okay.
But I get to meet didn't actually meet, but we passed through a new speaker.
In the House or the Senate?
The State House.
Okay, the
Yeah,
State House.
yeah,
Okay.
going downtown, yeah.
Oh, that's been very controversial this year. The
Yeah,
speakers.
Yeah, exactly. It was this was like about a
interesting.
year and a half ago. This was when it was kind of sort of on a hot topic
Uh-huh.
about what was going on with the old speaker, and now they have been appointed a new speaker, and we just kind of sort of and the person I was talking to and said, "Hey, that's the new speaker in the House." Yeah, I mean it's an old building.
Uh-huh. Yeah, well, everyone should know, I'm looking at the camera, everyone should know that all of the hearings are open to the public. And so if you can figure out when a particular committee is meeting or when a bill is going to be discussed, you Ohioans are free to attend that.
Yeah.
You don't have to sign up in advance. You show up. There's a little metal detector to make sure that you're being safe, and you can sit in on that committee.
That's one thing that I asked Nancy, because a lot of my people, my community, Somali community, a lot of people didn't think that it was open to a public when the city council members are actually meeting. Unless you want to speak, then you have to
Right.
register and go through a different route. But if you just want to show up and listen, it's open to public.
Yeah, you can also see it on, if you Google the Ohio channel, you can find recordings of these things.
Yeah. You can definitely find the recording stuff. Your current job may not be on the way on if you get elected to do this.
Well, the current person in the seat,
Yeah.
by the way, her name is Antoinette Miranda.
I was going to get into, she endorsed you.
She endorsed me, but she's an OSU professor, actually.
Okay.
So she's managing to be on the State Board of Education while being the director of a department at Ohio State.
Oh, she's a director of a department.
I am not the director of the department at Ohio State, so I have slightly more time in my hands than she does.
The director of department, what department? The physics?
She's a director of a department that's within the College of Education and Human Ecology.
Okay.
So she's very plugged into the schools and training new teachers and those sorts of things.
Yeah, because when you reached out, I did a little bit digging, and that's one thing that came about, that she had endorsed you to be the next person for that job. So now let's talk about the election and how that actually works. Do you pretty much, can anybody vote for you? Like, what particular district is it? Like kind of sort of a borderline on that district and nobody else can vote? So give us just a general overview on how that would work.
Sure. So the district is pretty big. So it includes Linden, it includes Wineland Park, it includes downtown Columbus. It goes all the way south to Grove City, to Circleville, extends east all the way to Reynoldsburg. There's parts of Westerville that are actually part of the district. And so like where we're sitting now is technically not part of the district, but if you go further north, it actually is. If you go further east, it's part of the district. If you go south of Morse Road, it's part of the district. And then it goes all the way out to Zanesville. It goes all the way out east to Zanesville, Lancaster, Logan's part of the district, Hocking County is part of the district, yeah.
How do you plan on reaching out those folks to kind of sort of, hand their voice to you?
Yeah, I mean, I visited most of the county Democratic parties already. I still want to go out to the more of the school boards thing. So I'm going to Zanesville. I'm going to Zanesville on Thursday. I have to say, of all the places in Ohio that I would want to represent, I got to say Hocking County. That's a pretty good one, right? I will use any excuse to go visit Hocking Hills for sure. I'm really excited about that one.
How many days do you plan on being there?
I went there last month for the local Democratic Party. Then I hope to go again.
So what do you hope to get out from this podcast? Like, who do you think that can hear your voice, that can say, okay, well, we need somebody that who's a high state professor to be on that role, that can kind of sort of make sure that from K to 12, get the right proper education?
The thing I'd like your listeners to just be aware of is that a lot of the work that I do in some way, directly or indirectly, affects the Somali community and the community of folks from that part of the world. So I've done a lot of work with Metro High School, which has lots of Somali and Middle Eastern folks. I organized the after-school coding club there, and we've had Somalis in that coding club, and it's been fun to work with them and to help them think about what their next career steps would be after graduation. I remember Muhammad was a very loyal member of coding club for many years. He's graduated. If you're out there, Muhammad, I want you to know that. Feel free to keep in touch. I want to know how you're doing, what you're doing with computer science these days. The work that I've done with the Ohio Department of Education, as I said, I try to help math teachers learn how to do computer science skills. So there's a big project with the Ohio Department of Education that I'm a part of where we're training math teachers to integrate computer science in their courses. And that curriculum that I helped to develop, I'm not in charge of it, but I helped to develop it. That curriculum is now in over 40 high schools across Ohio. Including some of the high schools that serve Somalis. So Horizon Science Academy on Morse Road, which has lots of Somali, they're using this curriculum I helped to develop. I just want people to know that it is such a thrill to me to create something interesting and fun and academically rigorous that can help the young Somalis and the young Middle Easterners and the young Americans to get to the next step and to learn valuable workforce skills. And I've been doing that the last couple of years. I'm going to continue doing that. And that's been a fun part of just being me in the world and the things that I'm interested in.
You couldn't say anybody, just being you. My daughter, she's 8. She's going on 9. We put her to STEMs she likes coding.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So she has a little iPad. So like, Dad, I can make this thing move. I can do this thing happen. Exploring that side of her mind, putting her to. So let's talk about the STEMs that you're involved in. Okay. So for the folks that are listening, so what's a STEM?
STEM stands for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. People often associate computer science with it as well. So some schools in Ohio are considered STEM schools. So there's a thing that they can apply for. What that often means is they tend to have good engineering programs. So Metro High School, which I've done a lot of work with, they are a STEM designated school. They were actually the first STEM designated school in Ohio. And so they have a really great robotics team. I'm friends with the robotics coach. His name is Caleb. He actually went to Metro as a student, and I let him know that there was an opening, a teacher opening. So I helped him come back.
Nice.
Yeah. So go Metrobots. if you're playing against the Metrobots, that's great. It's all a team sport. Yeah. So some of those schools are STEM designated, and some aren't. So for example, a school might want to advertise itself as more of a performing arts school. And so they might not want to get the STEM designation. I mean, everybody has science classes. Everybody has math classes. Most places have engineering classes at this point. It's just a matter of it's a little bit of branding, but it's a thing that's there.
Is your wife work there?
My wife works for the Central Ohio Area Agency on Aging. That's a tongue twister, right? Central Ohio Area Agency on Aging. So they can connect people with resources, and they tend to work with older folk. In her job, she drives around to meet with different people that are her clients. She has about 30 clients, and she tries to make sure that everybody has what they need, everybody has as much of that. Can I say one more thing about my wonderful, loving wife? I'm looking at the camera. So we do have kids. So I have a 3-year-old daughter. She's super cute. I'll show you the pictures on my phone in a minute.
Is this your first one?
This is our first natural born. We've had kids in our house before. So there was a mom in our neighborhood who was kind of struggling with her kids, and so we took them in for a couple of years. So I've had teenagers in my house. That's another big thing that qualifies me for the State Board of Education. That I have had teenagers in my house. Do you have teenagers in your house?
I give you props for that, man.
Okay.
I give you props for that. Well done. It takes a load of responsibility for somebody to take kids in, let alone a teenager.
Yeah, they moved in our house when they were elementary age, and they just lived with us until they became teens. And
how many years?
There were 2. The younger one was just starting kindergarten when they moved in, and they moved out when they were about 16. So there was quite a few years in our house. They're doing okay. They're doing pretty well, I think. And then after they moved out, my wife and I had our first natural born kiddo, and she's great. And so, yes, an interesting fact about my wife is that she actually spent some time in Africa growing up. So she was in the Central African Republic. Her father was a doctor there. Okay. So he worked in a hospital. Was she missionary? Or? Yeah, they were missionary kids. He was a missionary doctor. Okay. But yeah, my wife grew up. She became fluent in the language. And sometimes she would translate in the clinic, and through being a part of the clinic there, she became interested in nursing. So she was a nurse for a long time. She still is licensed as a nurse and with her role.
How long has you been married?
We just celebrated our 15-year anniversary. Yeah.
Congrats. Yeah, I'm about like 10.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Time flies.
Time flies. Just like yesterday when my firstborn was born. I have 3 kids.
Oh, great.
I have a 8-year and a 6-year and 3 years. Yeah, it's full of hustle. Tough time, I'm telling you. Sometimes, like somebody was telling me, like you are in the middle of it, meaning like in the midst of it, like you're raising in, like this one fights this one gets jealous about this one kicks in, and it just it's a difficult time, but I enjoyed every bit of it. It just at night when you put them in bed and you just kind of sort of relax and be like, okay, maybe I get 1 hour just to watch a video on TV.
I'm right there with you. Right there with you.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So you guys are 15 years. Part of that 15 years, you were actually raising other kids that were not.
We've been through a lot for sure.
Yeah. Well, were you going to school at the same time?
I was in graduate school when we met, so I was earning my PhD when we met. Can I say one thing? Yeah. Like, going back to the Bible story stuff, the one thing I wanted to say is that in Ohio, in the science class, when they talk about the origin of the universe, they talk about, human evolution, there's the teachers they're only allowed to talk about what a college textbook would say about the way that human beings came to be. They're only allowed to talk about what the Ohio State Astronomy Department would talk about, which is that we think that the universe began about 14 billion years ago. What teachers are not allowed to talk about is that they're not allowed to say, like, well, the Creation Museum doesn't think that it was 14 billion years ago. They think it was 6,000 years ago. They are not supposed to talk about, the Creation Museum thinks that human evolution didn't happen, or that there's another thing called intelligent design, which is another Christian idea that some people talk about. And they're not supposed to talk about, all right, so the creationism is one idea, right, that many Christians are fond of. Intelligent design is another idea that many Christians are fond of. And then there's what is written in your science textbook. In Ohio, the only thing that science teachers are supposed to be doing is teaching from the textbook, in which none of this is discussed. There are Muslims that read the Quran, and there's these beautiful passages about how the world was created and the thought that went into it and those kinds of things. And there's a time and a place for that. So, for example, in a comparative religions course, it would be great to discuss, like, this is what Christians and Jews read in the book of Genesis. This is what Muslims read in the Quran. That's great, but it doesn't belong in a science class. And if we're not careful, the fundamentalist Christians in the State House are going to loosen the rules that allow your science teachers to talk about creationism in the science class. We don't want one religion to be influencing what's in the science class. We just want the science class to focus on the science. And if people want to have a conversation at home about this is what you learned, and this is maybe what you think is slightly different from that, that's fine. But in your science class, you're only going to get what's in the textbook. And that is under threat. So we don't want our science classes to be this soapbox for evangelical Christianity, right? I don't want that. I don't think you want that. If I'm elected to the State Board of Education, I probably have the most experience dealing with this world because I grew up an evangelical Christian. I'm now more of a progressive Christian. I'm a Methodist. I'm a progressive Methodist. And so I don't think that the universe began in 6,000 years, right? I understand that there's flaws with that. So if I'm on the state board, that's something that I have a lot of skill with navigating, and even just me being a physics professor gives me some authority to talk about how insane it would be to have evangelical Christians trying to mess with our science standards, if that makes any sense. I hope that everybody wants that. I hope everybody wants to keep religion out of the science classes.
I think what you're just saying is that the existence of the science where we are right now could benefit with somebody like you going into those community members.
Yeah, we need to teach the best science we can. No, we have this Intel chip factory that's being built, right? That is built on the principles of science. We have a new Facebook data center that's about to be built.
Yeah.
You know,
I think whatever that Facebook's building, maybe it's the fourth or the fifth, because I know they started on Hilliard.
Because I'm a computer guy, I have a little computer website that uses one of the Amazon data centers that's in Columbus.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So you can tell actually which one you bounce off the...
So it's very fast, yeah. We're lucky to... Your viewers may not know this, but we're very lucky to have our own Amazon data center in Columbus because it's just lightning fast.
Yeah. So let me get your expert on this. Like, how do you think the world started?
How do I think the world started? 14 billion years ago, as far as we can tell, was much, much hotter and much, much denser than it was today. So that's from what we can see. So we can look and we can see that galaxies are moving away from each other. Then it's easy to wonder that, well, if they're moving away from each other, then in the distant past, they must have been much closer together. It is logical to conclude. And if they're much closer together, they would have been more dense. And if all that energy was much closer together, then it must have been much hotter. And so you can take the clock back further and further and further and conclude that 14 billion years ago, it must have been insanely hot. It must have been insanely dense. And before 14 billion years ago, it's really anyone's guess as to exactly what happened. If you meet it, there are physicists who will tell you what they think happened before 14 billion years, and they don't really, they're just guessing, really. But there's no real evidence for what happened before. So for me, I believe in God. I believe that's an important part of constructing the meaning of the world. And for me, I think that 14 billion years ago, that could have been God saying that, all right, we're going to have a universe now. In the Christian tradition, the Genesis account says, let there be light. And what's interesting is that the first era of the universe is the radiation-dominated era.
Help me understand when you hear this galaxy is this many years light away. What does that actually mean?
So it takes, 8 minutes for light to get from the sun to Earth, right? Okay. So that's 8 light minutes. So that's one way of thinking about distances is a light minute.
So the sun's light to get to us, it takes about 8 minutes.
I believe so, yeah.
Okay.
And then to the nearest star, it is about 4 light years, something like that. So if you wanted to get to the next star, if you decided you were tired of the solar system, you're ready for something new, you'd have to get into a spaceship, somehow get it up to the speed of light, and then do that for 4 years, and then you'd be at the next star system. It's a long time. So it's a convenient way of thinking about distances. If I were you, I'd prefer that over parsecs. Parsecs is it's another way to measure distance. It has to do with one of the best ways to measure the distances to stars is that if you take a picture of the star in the summer months, and then you wait until, say, the winter when the Earth is on the other side of the sun, you take another picture of the stars, and if that star is in a slightly different position, that means that it must be close enough to us that it matters whether you're on one side of the sun or the other. And depending on how much the position of that star shifts, they can figure out how far away it is. Because if it doesn't shift at all, that means that it's very far away. If it shifts a little bit, then it might actually be pretty close.